Welcome to our show for the love of retro reloaded. First of all, we would like to thank you all for your support, as our channel has now more than 5,000 subscribers. You will notice a few improvements to our show, such as the inclusion of early Windows games and a new rating system for our reviews, like the good old magazine days. In this episode, we review the amazing Cubix for the ZX Spectrum and the Musketeer for the Commodore 64. In our vault, we remember the classic Alien Trilogy and review the exciting action platformer Haunted Lands. We examine the incredible N-Go computer in our hardware review, and finally, in our history lesson, we remember the events of the catastrophic Saturnday. Here we go! We start this week's review with Saturn's Musketeer, a game for the Commodore 64. The game is a unique platformer with really interesting elements such as sword fight, including various stances, such as defend and upper or lower attacks. There is a variety of objectives in each screen, such as collecting keys or lanterns. Some enemies you can avoid altogether, whilst other you must fight in order to retrieve a key. These keys will give you access to the various doors throughout the stages, and these in turn will transfer you to a different screen, usually with hidden treasures or back access to some room. The lanterns you collect are usually a prerequisite to open some dungeon door. The enemy AI is very good, with the hostile musketeers being able to defend themselves quite effectively. The graphics and the sound are of the usual high Saturn standards. The controls are very responsive, but I did notice a little sliding effect to the character's movement, but nothing too serious to ruin the gameplay. The game is colorful, fun, action-packed, and will keep you entertained for a long time. To sum it up, we give graphics a solid 9, music and sound effects 8.7, controls are awarded an 8, and gameplay gets a solid 9, for a total of 8.6, another solid hit for the Saturnic team. Our second review today is about Cubix, a game by Gogin, a Russian programmer, and winner of the YRGB 2025 competition. It is a 3D platformer that, quite frankly, I never thought possible in a machine such as the humble ZX Spectrum. You see, the game is based on the famous indie game Fez, and yes, it comes complete with the 3D rotating effect of that game. You control Bix, and you try to break a curse on your land by climbing a variety of towers. The game allows you to pick up and stack objects and jump along platforms. But the most interesting element of the gameplay, by far, is the ability to move in 3 dimensions. It is quite a programming marvel, and as you can see for yourself, it works like a charm. The game is quite fun too, on its own, and the controls are quite responsive and with no problems. The graphics are monochrome, but quite detailed and wonderfully animated. The music and sound effects are great, and the game is quite long and will provide you with tons of fun. So, we will award graphics a solid 10, controls a well-deserved 9, music and sound effects a 9, and gameplay, as expected, another 9, for a total of 9.25, along with the title of Game of the Week. Amazing! In our hardware review this week, and due to the fact that I became a ZX Spectrum Next KS3 supporter, I've decided to review one of the most famous ZX Spectrum Next clones, the NGO. The NGO has a sturdy and of high quality materials construction, even though it's a printed case. In the front, you have the classic 9-pin Atari joystick ports that work flawlessly with all the joysticks of the ZX era. On left side, we meet the reset and drive button next to the SD MMC card slot that fits and exits easily. Finally, we have the NMI button that we'll get to later. On the back side, we have a variety of ports such as the S-Video port, a VGA port, the classic mic and audio out, the HDMI for better quality of image, an expansion port for all your Spectrum peripherals, and finally the AC plug. The case has a very good finish and it's kept together with strong metallic supports. It's a very classy case considering the low cost. So, after all this, let's go see it in action. Right from the start, we are greeted with the NGO introductory screen with quite a few options that we'll see in a minute. Moving on, and after some useful information and the credits, it takes us to the main system menu, and we're greeted with lots of choices. Right from the start, the Next Basic is accessible, and no, there's no one key, one word method here, just good old typing. Now, going back to the menu, we are given a variety of modes to boot into, such as the CP/M, or a version of the classic machines, such as the 48K I chose here. The one key, one word method is here waiting for us, and all the commands work, well, as expected. From the main menu, again, we can start the browser. That will give us the option to load straight from the SD card any game or program from the classic ZX Spectrum, just by choosing it with a joystick or cursors and hitting, well, enter. can scroll down the menu with left, right or up, down. And there. The NGO provides many options, including the choice of version to load, if available, and then we have our game in our screen in a jiffy. I've met no compatibility issues so far with any game, as long as we set our options correctly. Now, we can use the same process to load, well, any game made specifically for the new side of the system, the ZX Spectrum Next Core. And as you can see, well, it works like a charm. Needless to say that the NGO is 100% compatible with the ZX Next, so you shouldn't have any problems with the software. There's a variety of remakes and new games for the system that will keep you entertained for a long time. Well, finally, when we boot the NGO, initially we have the option to configure each of the available systems, and there are quite a lot. We can also see the credits, or, and that is a great bonus, let's reboot. By pressing the C button at the startup menu, we get to load an entirely different core, such as an Amstrad, an NES, and so on, giving the system a powerful new face. At last, but not least, we should mention that the system includes a set of tools, such as an online updater. And of course, if you chose to include it in your system board order, a Wi-Fi utility. Its configuration is really simple. Don't let it scare you. In conclusion, this is an amazing, cheaper option for those of you who want a ZX Spectrum Next machine and couldn't get their hands on one or couldn't afford it, since it's significantly cheaper. It is well built, compatible, and a definitive thumbs up on our hardware review. In this week's Vault, we begin with a game called Haunted Lands. It is a shooting platformer with a horror theme by Alevgor, and right from the start it will remind you of various classic Apogee platformers, or the Achronia game we reviewed a few episodes back. You get to choose from a variety of characters, all with their pros and cons, such as ranged or melee attacks and powerful weapons or spells. The game provides an inventory system in which you can equip items that you acquire, either within the game or by purchasing them. And those give you different advantages. It also has a very thorough and quite explanatory tutorial in the form of training grounds that I personally suggest you try out before venturing into the unknown. The game is fast and requires a good amount of skill and thinking on the go. The controls are solid, and the enemies are nicely animated and drawn with a creepy and colorful design at the same time, whilst the music is very atmospheric, along with excellent sound effects. The game includes boss fights that require a different approach depending on the character you choose, and that makes the game really interesting. A solid, good gameplay. Well, on with our ranking now, and we start with the graphics that earned a solid 9. The controls get a well-deserved 9 too, whilst the music and sound effects get an 8.5, with the gameplay earning an 8.5 as well, for a total of 8.75. A game that deserves a fair amount of your time. It will provide you with numerous hours of fun. Our second Vault Dweller is the classic Alien Trilogy game for MS-DOS. A game by Probe, published by Acclaim, and quite honestly, a hidden gem of the era. The game was one of the last FPSs before the Quake revolution, and as such, because of the wait for the aforementioned game, it did not receive the attention it deserved. The game follows the events of the films loosely, since you play a version of Ripley that is actually a Marine. You have an arsenal of weapons, each with different uses and firepower. The game is quite atmospheric, and the classic beeping of the motion detector raises tensions appropriately. The controls have more similarities to the classic Doom games rather than the build engine games that followed. That means that control with a mouse or a keyboard is quite difficult, but the keyboard is a dream to use. The graphics are among the best of the era, and the palette used intensifies the fear brought about by the aliens or the facehuggers hiding in each corner. Later in the game, you will face also enemy mercenaries of the company and even synthetics that will try to silence you permanently. The music is eerie, and the special effects and the sound effects are wonderful, contributing to the atmosphere, whilst the difficulty can be adjusted to your needs. In conclusion, we will award the graphics with a 9. The controls, since you need to play old style, get a 7.5. The music and sound effects receive a 9, and the gameplay an 8.7, bringing the total to an 8.55. Definitely a great FPS of the golden DOS era. Today we're going to talk about the probably most disastrous console launch of all time, the Saturnday. Back in 1995, the world was holding its breath for the launch of the two most important consoles of that period, the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. As Nintendo was still capitalizing on the success of the Super NES, that still enjoyed a healthy amount of sales, and due to the fact that the next generation console in the form of Ultra 64, as the Nintendo 64 was called at the time, was still more or less in the drawing board, it seemed that the only major player in the market to claim the throne of the dormant Nintendo was Sega, with little faith in Sony's project at the time, as Sony was a new and untested contestant in the video game console market. But as the months went by, the details that surfaced about the upcoming Sony PlayStation brought panic to the Sega executives. Even though the Sega Saturn was designed to be a two-dimensional powerhouse, its 3D capabilities were nothing to write home about, whilst the PlayStation looked like it was designed to be the ultimate polygon miracle with its new 3D processing GPU and its R3000 CPU workhorse. Panic got the better of Sega, and the Saturn was redesigned hastily with a second CPU and a second GPU, the VDU2, to enhance the 3D graphical capabilities, but at the cost of an extremely complex and difficult to use developer set of tools. But the hardware was not the only toll to the panic. The marketing campaign for the Sega Saturn in the North America region, the most important region at the time, was a carefully and masterfully crafted campaign that was called the Sega Saturnday, and was supposed to be the grand opening for the console on September the 2nd, 1995, in all the retail electronic stores of the country. Backed by a marketing campaign of $50 million, the Sega Saturnday was a bit delayed compared to the initial estimation of a 95 spring release. To ensure the retailers had enough stock, the machine was test marketed during the summer, and finally, and probably, and most importantly, for the console to launch with at least as much as 20 titles. Further updates of the Sony PlayStation hardware capabilities, though, caused major panic in Sega executives that led to the most disastrous marketing decision ever, and for many, the beginning of the end for Sega's hardware history. Shockingly for everyone, on May 95 at the E3 press conference, Tom Kalinske, CEO of Sega of America, announced that the Sega Saturn was available immediately across the US and a few days later in Canada for the price of $3.99, effectively ditching the whole Saturnday campaign. Of course, that wasn't the fact. There simply wasn't enough stock to distribute to the retailers, and the console had as much as 3 titles ready to play. The retailers that weren't informed of the new strategy beforehand were outraged, and those who did not receive consoles refused to sell Sega Saturn for the rest of its short life as a payback for the betrayal. To make matters worse, soon after the disastrous surprise announcement, Sony took the stage at the E3, and Steve Race announced the Sony PlayStation launch price with the now famous phrase $2.99, making the final nail in Saturn's coffin. Even though the Sega Saturn was a success in Japan, it never quite recovered from the Saturnday that never was disaster, and sales outside Japan were extremely disappointing. With Nintendo's console still a good 2 years away, Sony sat on the throne of the video game console market and stood there for a good 10 years, marking at the same time the fall of Sega. Don't miss our history lesson next week. Class dismissed.